Hello everyone, welcome to a holiday edition take and bake. We're going to be making a spice bundt cake with maple cinnamon frosting. So let's get started. First things we're going to want to do are preheat our oven to 350 and then get our bundt pan greased. I found a new technique that I love that ensures with 100% success rate so far that my bundt cakes come out and don't stick, and that's coating the entire thing with butter. And then whereas I usually use flour, I use sugar. Pour some sugar in there and distribute it all along the inside and the outside walls and make sure it's nice and coated. This helps the bundt cake come out at the end and makes it way less sticky, which is amazing. And then in one bowl we will prepare our dry ingredients. We have 2½ cup flour, 1 teaspoon baking powder, half a teaspoon baking soda, 1¼ teaspoon ground cinnamon, half a teaspoon ground ginger, and then a 1/4 teaspoon allspice, which I didn't have, so I used nutmeg instead. It tastes pretty good. And then also a 1/4 teaspoon salt here. I added a little bit more because I like that punch. Then we'll get that mixed up and set that aside and prepare our wet ingredients, which is starting with 1 stick, aka half a cup of butter, which has been left at room temperature, and then we cream that, and we're going to be adding 1 cup of brown sugar, get that nice and mixed up, and then we're going to be adding 2 eggs, one at a time, mixing it up between each egg, and that's nice and ready. We're going to be adding half a teaspoon vanilla extract, more or less. And then the money maker, we have half a cup of molasses. This is what gives the cake a ton of flavor. Look how dark that is. It looks so cool. We'll get that mixed up. And then here's the interesting part. We're going to be adding half our dry mixture. We're going to get that loosely incorporated. It doesn't have to be perfect, because at this stage we're going to add 1 cup of plain yogurt, and it's tough to get a single 1 cup of plain yogurt. So what you can do, as I did here, is I added 2/3 cup of Greek yogurt with 1/3 cup water. That roughly approximates 1 cup of normal yogurt, which is hard to find at grocery stores in the single 1 cup serving these days. And then we also add half a cup of milk as well. And it looks pretty unattractive at this point, but don't worry, the magic will happen shortly as we mix it up and add the rest of our dry ingredients. And then at this point we want to scrape down the sides, make sure it's well incorporated, and then once we have a nice homogeneous mixture, we don't want to overbeat it too much, just make sure that it's kind of together, and then we're going to be pouring it in our prepared bundt pan. And all I do is do my best to kind of rotate the pan a little bit as I'm pouring the batter in there to try to spread it out roughly evenly. I always do a little bit of shaking and tapping at the end to kind of make sure it gets distributed evenly. So once we have this prepared, scraped down, evened out, we're going to be putting it in our 350-degree oven for, I started with 45 minutes and the cake was actually done. The recipe calls for 45 to 65. I think I could have taken it out at 40, so I recommend checking yours at 35 to 40 minutes. Mine was just about perfect, maybe slightly overdone at 45 minutes. So once it's out of the oven, I put it on a cooling rack in the bundt pan and I let it rest for about 15 to 20 minutes until it's cooled down and contracted a little bit. And then I have this little silicone spatula here, and I'm gently going around the edges trying to separate it a little bit. There's nothing worse than trying to get a bundt cake out of the pan and it tears or rips or doesn't come out right. Such a bad feeling. So I try to mitigate it as much as I can by letting it cool down in the pan, trying to loosen it up a little bit along the edges, and then once I'm done this, I flip it over gently and I give it a little hard tapping on the side to try to loosen it up. And then once you've kind of smacked it around a little bit, you can sort of lift gingerly on the sides, and if you feel the cake starting to release, you know you've done it right. And if it still feels pretty stubborn, like it's stuck up in the bottom or top in this case of the tin, you might want to kind of wait a little bit longer, let it cool down a bit more, maybe tap it a little bit because you want it to come out in one piece. And thankfully, because of this sugar trick that I found out about, it worked and it came out magically in one single beautiful cake. Look at that. It's a good feeling. So after we let it cool, so once you take it out of the pan, we're going to let it cool for at least 20 minutes. You want it, pretty lukewarm to the touch. But at that point we can make the glaze. It's really simple. It's just a cup of powdered sugar, a tablespoon of maple syrup, and a tablespoon of milk. Oh, and of course a quarter teaspoon ground cinnamon. Don't be like me and accidentally pour in teaspoons of the maple syrup and milk. Use a tablespoon. So that meant I had to go back in and add more. Added too much, it was too liquidy, so I had to add more powdered sugar. Eventually you're going to want a consistency that is viscous but not so wet that if you pour it down the sides of the cake it's just going to all slough off. You want it to be fairly thick, but not so thick that it won't drip off the edge of a spoon or a spatula, for example. So this is about what I ended up with. And then all I did was hold a spatula above the cake and kind of let it fall down. And as you can see, mine isn't gorgeous, but it sure tasted good. So I hope everyone has as much fun making this as I did, and I hope everyone has a wonderful holiday season. Thank you so much, and happy baking.